My heart shattered when at midnight I found my 14-year-old disabled grandson curled up in a freezing garage on a thin air mattress. He was shivering while his room had been turned into my daughter-in-law's luxurious yoga studio. Her kids slept in lavish bedrooms. My grandson whispered, "Grandpa, am I worth nothing?" I calmly smiled, and then began turning her life into a living nightmare. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is in your region right now. My name is Howard Bennett. I'm 68 years old, living in quiet retirement in Boulder, Colorado. Before that, I was a middle school principal for 35 years. People think principals just shuffle papers and hand out detentions. They're wrong. We're referees, therapists, detectives, and sometimes the last line of defense for kids who have no one else. My son Dennis is 42. When his first wife Sarah passed during childbirth, I watched something break inside him. He raised Ethan alone for 6 years, and despite the grief, he was a good father. Ethan was born with cerebral palsy, spastic diplegia. He walks with crutches, but his mind is sharp as a tack. The boy beats me at chess 3 times out of 4. Then Melissa came along. She was beautiful. Blonde hair, perfect smile, the kind of woman who turns heads. She called herself a wellness influencer with 12,000 Instagram followers, posting pictures in expensive workout clothes. Makes about $800 a month doing it. At first, she seemed good for Dennis. When they married and moved into the house on Pinewood Drive, my house technically, which I let them live in rent-free, I was cautiously optimistic. That optimism lasted 6 months. I still own that house, by the way. 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a 2-car garage. I bought it 20 years ago as an investment property, and when Dennis needed a place for his growing family, I let them move in. No rent. Just take care of the place, I told him. Take care of your family. The changes were subtle at first. Melissa would sigh dramatically whenever Ethan needed help. She started calling her biological children, Chloe, now 10, and Jackson, 7. My kids, while Ethan became Dennis's son. Like furniture that came with the marriage. Small things, you understand. A rolled eye here, a muttered comment there. The kind of cruelty that's hard to pin down, but impossible to miss if you're paying attention. Dennis noticed. But my son has always been allergic to conflict. So he made excuses. Melissa's tired. Ethan needs to be more independent. I bit my tongue, told myself it wasn't my place. That Saturday night changed everything. It was late January, temperature below freezing. I drove to Pinewood Drive around 11:30 because Ethan had left his inhaler at my house. The boy has mild asthma. The house was dark except for the TV glow upstairs. I let myself in quietly with my key. I checked Ethan's room first. Empty. The bed was gone. In its place were yoga mats, probably $200 each, arranged in neat rows. Himalayan salt lamps, meditation cushions, essential oil diffusers. My grandson's bedroom had become Melissa's yoga studio. Heart pounding, I searched the house. Chloe's room. A princess palace with canopy bed and fairy lights. Jackson's room. Equally spacious. Guest room, converted into Melissa's walk-in closet. Where was Ethan? I found him in the garage. The concrete floor was like ice. The thermometer on the wall read 39 degrees, barely above freezing. My 14-year-old grandson was curled on a cheap air mattress, the kind you buy at a dollar store for camping trips. A single thin blanket, not even a comforter, was pulled up to his chin. He was shivering so hard I could hear his teeth chattering from 10 feet away. His crutches leaned against a stack of cardboard boxes. His school backpack sat on the floor, spotted with oil stains from the cars. "Ethan," I whispered. He looked up with a mixture of shame and relief I'll never forget. "Grandpa, what are you doing here?" I knelt beside him, feeling the cold concrete through my pants. "Your inhaler. How long have you been sleeping out here?" 3 weeks. Melissa said it's temporary, while they renovate my room. I looked around. Melissa's Range Rover took up one space. Dennis's sedan the other. My grandson slept between them like luggage. There's no renovation, I said. He shook his head, then looked at me with eyes that broke something in my chest. Grandpa, am I worth nothing? I've been asked many questions in my life. Nothing prepared me for that one from my own grandson. I pulled him close. You're worth everything. Get your things. You're coming home with me. The next morning, Melissa appeared at my door at 7:15, wearing workout clothes that cost more than most car payments. Howard, she said, voice dripping with false sweetness. I was so worried when I couldn't find Ethan. I found him in your garage, in 39-degree weather. Her smile didn't flicker. It's temporary. We're renovating. I saw his room, Melissa. It's a yoga studio. Behind her, Dennis appeared, unable to meet my eyes. Dad, he started. It's complicated. Melissa needs space for her business. Ethan is 14 with cerebral palsy, and you let your wife put him in a freezing garage while her children have rooms the size of apartments. Melissa's mask slipped. I saw the coldness underneath. Howard, this is our family, our house, our decisions. I looked at her, then at my son staring at his shoes. The house, I said quietly, is actually mine. Check the deed. Her face went pale. I smiled, not warmly, the smile I use to give parents who threaten lawsuits because their precious child got caught cheating. Melissa, you just made the biggest mistake of your life. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my basement workshop, surrounded by antique clocks I restore as a hobby, thinking about how we got here. I remember Dennis bringing Ethan home from the hospital. Sarah had been gone 3 days. My son was a ghost. Hollow eyes, mechanical movements, going through the motions of life. But when he held that tiny baby, this fragile child with legs that didn't quite work right, who would need extra care, extra patience, extra everything. Something lit up in his eyes. A spark of purpose in all that grief. I'm going to protect him, Dad, Dennis had said, his voice cracking. No matter what. Sarah would have wanted that, and I want it too. I remember Ethan's first steps, with tiny crutches at 4 years old. The physical therapist said he might never walk independently. But Ethan was stubborn. Got that from his grandfather, I like to think. Dennis was right there beside him, hands outstretched, ready to catch him if he fell. Look, Grandpa, I'm walking. Dennis had tears streaming down his face. What happened to that man? I remember the exact moment. I knew something was wrong with Melissa. Thanksgiving 2 years ago. Ethan knocked over his water glass. An accident. Before anyone could react, Melissa sighed heavily. This is why we can't have nice things. Ethan's face turned red as he tried cleaning up the spill, hands shaking. Melissa, I said. It was an accident. She looked at me with cold eyes. Of course. Everything with him is an accident. Everything requires special accommodation. I should have pushed harder then. I won't make that mistake again. The morning after the garage, I made Ethan chocolate chip pancakes. He ate slowly, not meeting my eyes. Grandpa, I don't want to cause trouble. You're not causing trouble. Melissa says I make everything difficult. She says the family would be happier without me. He swallowed hard. She says if I tell anyone, she'll send me to a special home. My hands trembled, not from fear, from rage. How long has this been going on? A couple years. It got worse after Jackson was born. Ethan, you are not a burden. Anyone who tells you different is lying. He almost smiled. That afternoon, Dennis came by alone, hands shoved in his pockets. Dad, we need to talk. Yes. Explain why your son was sleeping in a garage in January. Melissa needed space for her work, and Ethan needs to learn independence. He's 14 with cerebral palsy. Your wife turned his room into an Instagram backdrop. That's not fair. Tell me the last time Melissa took Ethan to a doctor, the last time she showed him any kindness. He couldn't answer. Ethan stays with me until I figure this out. You can't just take him. I'm giving him a warm bed where he doesn't wonder if he's worth anything. I paused. You used to be a good father. Find that man again, before it's too late. He left without a word. Over the next 3 weeks, I became a regular visitor at Pinewood Drive. I came to check on things and bring cookies. Melissa was suspicious but couldn't refuse without looking bad. What she didn't know, Colorado is a one-party consent state for recordings. I documented everything. Garage temperature, 28 degrees one night when I stopped by for coffee. The bathroom schedule, Ethan banned from the main bathroom after 9 p.m. because it disturbed Melissa's sleep routine. The way she spoke to him when she thought no one important was listening. A disabled boy should be grateful someone feeds him at all, I heard her say once, her voice dripping with contempt. Most families would have dumped you at some institution years ago. You should thank me every day for putting up with you. I recorded that too. Every word. I hired private investigator Marcus Turner for $3,200. Within 2 weeks, he documented Melissa's routine. 6 hours daily on yoga and salons while Ethan walked to school on crutches through snow. I consulted family attorney Rachel Morris in Denver. She listened to my recordings with a grim face. You have a case. Grandparents can petition for custody if the child's situation is harmful. This is evidence of neglect. What do I need? Medical records, testimony, documentation. Then we file for temporary custody. How long? A few months. Longer if they fight. They'll fight. Then we prepare for war. That night, I watched gears turn in a clock I was restoring. An 1890s mantelpiece that had been silent for decades. Each piece precisely machined, each movement deliberate. One wrong gear, and the whole mechanism fails. But when everything aligns properly, even the smallest force can move the hands. Melissa thought she was clever, hiding cruelty behind Instagram filters and wellness hashtags. She thought I was a harmless old man who would eventually give up and go away. She had no idea who she was dealing with. 35 years of entitled parents trying to manipulate the system had taught me things. Things about patience, things about documentation, things about finding the exact pressure point that brings the whole rotten structure crashing down. My phone buzzed. A text from Dennis. Melissa wants you to stop coming by so often. She says you're disrupting our routine. I smiled, a genuine smile this time. The game was just beginning. I typed my response. Tell Melissa I'm just getting started. A week after my text to Dennis, Melissa made her first move. She was smarter than I'd given her credit for. I'll admit that. She sensed the shift in the air, the way prey animals sense a predator nearby. And instead of waiting for the attack, she tried to change the battlefield. Ethan came home from school on a Thursday afternoon looking confused. Grandpa, something weird happened. What's that? Melissa moved me back into my room. He paused. Well, part of it, she put up a wall in the middle. Half is a closet now for her clothes. But I have a bed again, a real one. I set down the clock gear I'd been cleaning. Did she say why? She said she realized she'd been too hard on me. She even hugged me. His voice was uncertain. It felt wrong, like she was performing for someone. Smart boy, my grandson. He understood manipulation, even when he couldn't name it. I drove over that evening to see for myself. The yoga studio had been compressed into half its former size with a hastily constructed partition wall, creating a tiny bedroom. Maybe 80 square feet. Enough to technically qualify as a room. Enough to claim she'd fixed the problem. Melissa greeted me with a smile so sweet it could give you cavities. Howard, come see Ethan's new room. We realized we were asking too much of him, expecting him to be so independent. Family should stick together, right? I looked at the cramped space, the second-hand bed frame, the single small window that barely let in light. Touching, I said. Though I notice your walk-in closet next door is still 3 times this size. Her smile flickered, just for a moment. We all make sacrifices for family. That evening I noticed something new on her Instagram. A long post about the beautiful journey of being a stepmother and the challenges of raising a child with special needs. She wrote about learning to be more patient and creating space for everyone in our blended family. 1,200 likes. Comments praising her for being so brave and such an inspiration. I screenshot everything. Rachel Morris, my attorney, would want to see this. Evidence of her creating a false narrative. 3 days later, Dennis called me at 7 in the morning. "Dad, we need to talk. Can you come over?" When I arrived, Melissa was waiting in the living room with her arms crossed. Dennis sat beside her, looking miserable. "Howard," Melissa began, her voice measured, "I think there's been a misunderstanding between us. I know you care about Ethan, we all do, but your constant visits are causing tension in our home. Dennis is stressed. The children are anxious. I think we need to establish some boundaries." "Boundaries?" I repeated. "Yes. Perhaps visits once a month instead of twice a week. And when you do visit, it would be helpful if you called ahead. 24 hours notice." I looked at my son. "Dennis, is this what you want?" He couldn't meet my eyes. "Dad, Melissa's right. You've been intense lately. Maybe some space would be good for everyone." I pulled out my phone and opened my notes app. "Let me write that down. Once a month. 24 hours notice. Anything else?" "Howard," Melissa said, "there's no need to be sarcastic." "I'm not being sarcastic. I'm being thorough." I looked up at her. "While we're establishing boundaries, let me share some of mine. I found the lease agreement Dennis signed 5 years ago when he moved in. Section 4, Clause B. The premises shall be maintained in habitable condition for all residents. Forcing a minor to sleep in an unheated garage in winter would be a clear violation." The color drained from Melissa's face. "That was temporary. 3 weeks in sub-freezing temperatures isn't temporary. It's actionable." I stood up. "You want boundaries? Here's one. I will be visiting my grandson whenever I choose. And I will be documenting everything I see. If you have a problem with that, I suggest you consult an attorney. I already have." Dennis finally looked up. "Dad, are you threatening us?" "No, Dennis. I'm informing you of facts. What you do with those facts is your choice." I walked to the door, then turned back. "By the way, Melissa, beautiful Instagram post about stepmother struggles. Very moving. I'm sure a judge would find it interesting reading. Right next to the audio recordings I have of you telling Ethan he should be grateful anyone feeds him at Hall." I left them sitting in stunned silence. That weekend, Ethan and I played chess at my kitchen table. He was quiet, moving pieces mechanically. "Something on your mind?" He captured my night before answering. "Melissa's been different since you came over. Nicer, but also watching me, like she's waiting for me to do something wrong." "Has she said anything to you?" "Privately," he hesitated. "She said if I complain to you again, she'll convince Dad to send me to a residential facility. A place for kids with disabilities whose families can't handle them." His voice cracked. "She said you're too old to take care of me anyway. That no court would give custody to a 68-year-old. I reached across the board and put my hand on his. "Ethan, I need you to listen carefully. No one is sending you anywhere. And I promise you, whatever happens next, you will never sleep in a garage again." He searched my face for reassurance. "What's going to happen next?" I smiled. "Checkmate in 4 moves." He looked down at the board, confused. Then his eyes widened as he saw it. My bishop, my rook, all positioned perfectly. I didn't even see that coming. Neither will she. Rachel Morris called me into her office on a Tuesday morning, about 3 weeks after my confrontation with Melissa. "We're ready," she said, sliding a thick folder across her desk. 47 photographs documenting the garage conditions. 12 audio recordings. Marcus Turner's surveillance report. 6 weeks of daily observations. Medical records from Dr. Samantha Reynolds showing weight loss, increased muscle spasticity, and elevated cortisol levels consistent with chronic stress. I flipped through the pages, every piece of evidence I'd gathered, organized, and annotated. Dr. Reynolds also provided a statement, Rachel continued. She's been Ethan's pediatrician for 14 years. She noticed the decline over the past 2 years, but couldn't prove the cause. Your documentation fills in the gaps. What happens now? 2 things simultaneously. First, we file a petition for temporary custody in Boulder County Court. Emergency basis. Second, we send a formal notice to cure or quit to Dennis and Melissa regarding the lease violations. They'll have 30 days to demonstrate that all residents have adequate living conditions or face eviction proceedings. And if they fix everything in 30 days, Rachel smiled grimly. That's the beauty of doing both at once. Even if they make the house perfect tomorrow, the custody petition is based on documented history. You can't unfreeze a child for 3 weeks. I signed the documents that afternoon. The custody petition was filed electronically. The notice to cure or quit went out by certified mail. Then I waited. The envelope arrived at Pinewood Drive 2 days later. I know because Marcus Turner, my investigator, watched it happen. He described the scene to me that evening. Your daughter-in-law opened it at the mailbox, read the first paragraph and dropped the rest of the mail on the ground. She stood there for a full minute, not moving. Then she went inside. 30 seconds later, I could hear her screaming through the closed windows. Part of me, a small, dark part, enjoyed that image. Melissa, who prided herself on never raising her voice, finally losing control. Dennis called me that night, his voice shaking. Dad, what is this? A notice to cure or quit. You're threatening to evict us. I'm exercising my rights as a property owner, I said calmly. The lease requires habitable conditions for all residents. A child sleeping in a garage at 28 degrees does not meet that standard. That was months ago. Ethan has his room back. Ethan has 80 square feet carved out of what used to be his room. And the pattern of neglect didn't start with the garage, Dennis. It's been years. There was a pause. Then Melissa's voice came on the line. She must have grabbed the phone. Howard, you vindictive old man. You think you can take our home? This is our family, our life. You have no right. Actually, I have every right. It's my house. I paused. And while we're talking, you should know I've also filed for emergency custody of Ethan. Silence. Complete silence. When Melissa spoke again, her voice was ice. You'll never get custody. No judge will give a child to a 68-year-old man living alone. We'll fight you with everything we have. I was counting on that, I said. Fighting means discovery. Discovery means everything you've done becomes part of the public record. Every audio recording, every photograph, every medical report. I wonder how your 12,000 Instagram followers will react when they learn what kind of stepmother you really are. She hung up without another word. Over the next week, I watched them scramble. Melissa hired a lawyer, a family friend who did mostly real estate closings, hopelessly outmatched against Rachel Morris. Dennis took time off work, looking more exhausted each day. They tried everything. Dennis left me voicemails, alternating between pleading and threatening. Melissa posted more Instagram content about her beautiful blended family, building a paper trail of lies. They even had Chloe call me, coach, to say that Daddy and Melissa love Ethan so much, and please don't break up our family. Using a 10-year-old as a weapon. That told me everything I needed to know about what kind of people I was dealing with. The court date was set for early April, a preliminary hearing to review the custody petition. 3 weeks away. 3 weeks for them to realize there was no escape. The evening before the deadline for their response to the notice to cure or quit, Dennis appeared at my door alone. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Dad, please, can we talk? Just us? I let him in. He sat at my kitchen table, the same spot where Ethan and I played chess, and put his head in his hands. I've made mistakes, he said quietly. I know that now, but Melissa, she's my wife, the mother of my children. If this goes to court, if everything comes out, our family will be destroyed. Your family started crumbling the moment you let your wife put your son in a garage. He flinched. What do you want from me? I leaned forward. I want you to remember who you were. The man who promised Sarah he would protect Ethan no matter what. The man who cried when his son took his first steps. I paused. I want you to pick a side, Dennis. But I'm not going to make that choice for you. He left without giving me an answer, but in my experience, silence is its own kind of answer. The morning of the preliminary hearing, I woke at 5 a.m. and couldn't go back to sleep. I made coffee, watched the sun rise over the mountains, and thought about what the day would bring. Ethan was already staying with me. Had been for the past 2 weeks, ever since Dennis and Melissa stopped returning my calls about visitation. Their lawyer had advised them, apparently, that limiting contact with me would look better in court. Instead, it just gave Ethan 2 weeks of peace for the first time in years. Rachel Morris met me outside the Boulder County Courthouse at 8:30. She was carrying 2 thick binders. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Ready." "Good. Because this is going to get ugly. Melissa's lawyer filed a motion yesterday claiming you're mentally unstable and obsessed with controlling your son's family. They're going to try to paint you as a vindictive old man with a grudge." I smiled. Let them try. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Judge Patricia Coleman presided, a stern woman in her 60s who, according to Rachel, had little patience for games. Dennis and Melissa sat at the opposite table with their lawyer, a nervous-looking man named Peterson, who kept shuffling his papers. Melissa looked like she was attending a garden party. Perfectly styled hair, tasteful jewelry, a sympathetic expression practiced in the mirror. Dennis just looked sick. Rachel presented our case methodically. The photographs came first. The garage, the air mattress, the thermometer showing 39 degrees. Then the medical records. Dr. Reynolds's documentation of Ethan's declining health over 2 years, the increased muscle spasticity, the weight loss. Then came the audio recordings. The first one was mild, Melissa complaining about Ethan's constant needs and how she never signed up for this. Peterson objected, claiming it was taken out of context. Judge Coleman overruled him. The second recording was worse, Melissa telling Ethan that his room needed to become her yoga studio because my mental health matters more than your comfort. But the third recording silenced the room. A disabled boy should be grateful someone feeds him at all. Most families would have dumped you at some institution years ago. You should thank me every day for putting up with you. I watched Melissa's face as her own words echoed through the courtroom. The careful mask cracked, just for a moment, revealing something ugly underneath. Then she composed herself and leaned over to whisper urgently to Peterson. Dennis sat frozen. His face had gone white. He was staring at his wife like he'd never seen her before. Judge Coleman's expression was stone. "Is there more?" "Yes, Your Honor," Rachel said. She played 2 more recordings. Melissa threatening to send Ethan to a residential facility. Melissa telling him he was worthless and unwanted. When the recordings ended, Judge Coleman turned to Peterson. "Does the respondent wish to address this evidence?" Peterson stood, clearly unprepared for what he'd just heard. "Your Honor, my clients maintain that these recordings have been selectively edited. The living situation was temporary, due to renovations." "Renovations?" Judge Coleman's voice was sharp. "I see photographs of a yoga studio with $200 mats and Himalayan salt lamps. I see no evidence of any construction." Melissa stood up suddenly. "Your Honor, if I may speak, you may not. Sit down." Melissa sat. Her hands were trembling. "I've heard enough for today," Judge Coleman said. "I'm granting temporary custody of the minor child Ethan Bennett to the petitioner, Howard Bennett, effective immediately. A full custody hearing will be scheduled within 3 weeks. Until then, the respondents may have supervised visitation only, 1 hour per week, at a location approved by the court." Melissa's face crumpled. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. As we left the courtroom, Dennis caught my arm. "Dad, those recordings, I didn't I never heard her say those things. I swear I didn't know. I looked at my son. This man I raised. This man I loved despite everything. You didn't know because you didn't want to know. There's a difference. He had no answer for that. That evening, something unexpected happened. I received an email from a reporter at the Boulder Daily Camera, our local newspaper. Someone had sent them copies of the audio recordings, along with screenshots of Melissa's Instagram posts about being a loving stepmother. I didn't send those materials. I have my suspicions about who did. Marcus Turner had access to everything, and he'd made no secret of his disgust at what he'd witnessed during his surveillance. But I never asked, and he never told me. The article appeared 5 days later. Wellness influencer accused of keeping disabled stepson in freezing garage. The headline was everywhere. Local news sites, then regional, then national social media picked it up. Within 48 hours, Melissa's Instagram following collapsed from 12,000 to barely 2,000. And most of those were people leaving angry comments. Her sponsors, the yoga mat company, the meditation app, the wellness supplements, terminated their contracts. Her income vanished overnight. She called me screaming, accusing me of destroying her life. "You did this," she hissed. "You leaked those recordings." "I didn't," I said calmly. "But I'm not sorry it happened. Actions have consequences, Melissa. That's a lesson you should have learned long ago." She hung up, sobbing. The full custody hearing was scheduled for the end of the month. 3 weeks away, and Melissa's world was already in ashes. The final hearing lasted less than 2 hours. Melissa showed up looking like a shadow of herself. Dark circles under her eyes, hair unwashed, no trace of the polished influencer image she'd cultivated for years. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by something plain and forgettable. She sat hunched in her chair, smaller somehow, like the courtroom itself was crushing her. Dennis sat beside her, but there was distance between them now. A gap that hadn't been there before. He kept glancing at her, then away, like he couldn't quite stand to look at what remained. Peterson, their lawyer, attempted one last defense. He argued that Melissa was under tremendous stress, that she'd made mistakes, but was committed to doing better, that tearing the family apart would harm the children. Judge Coleman listened patiently. Then she spoke. "Mr. Peterson, I've reviewed all the evidence in this case. I've listened to recordings of your client telling a child with cerebral palsy that he should be grateful anyone feeds him. I've seen photographs of that child sleeping on an air mattress in a freezing garage while his step-siblings enjoyed heated bedrooms. I've read medical reports documenting the physical toll this treatment took on his body." She paused, looking directly at Melissa. "This court finds that the minor child, Ethan Bennett, has suffered neglect and emotional abuse in the care of his father and stepmother. Full legal and physical custody is hereby granted to his grandfather, Howard Bennett. The father, Dennis Bennett, is granted supervised visitation, 2 hours every 2 weeks, at a location approved by this court. The stepmother, Melissa Bennett, is denied visitation rights, pending completion of a parenting evaluation and counseling program." Melissa made a sound, something between a gasp and a sob. Her shoulders shook, her hands flew to her face. The woman who never raised her voice, who prided herself on control and composure, was falling apart in front of everyone. Her carefully constructed world had finally, completely collapsed. Dennis sat motionless, staring at the table. I couldn't tell if he was relieved or devastated, maybe both. After the hearing, I found him in the parking lot, leaning against his car. His tie was loosened, his jacket wrinkled. He looked 10 years older than he had 6 months ago. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. "Now you figure out what kind of man you want to be." "I've lost everything, Dad. My son, my house. Melissa's talking about divorce. She blames me for not stopping you." I shook my head. "You haven't lost, Ethan. You have visitation rights. Use them. Show up. Be the father you used to be. He still loves you, Dennis. He just doesn't trust you anymore. You'll have to earn that back." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "And you? Will you ever forgive me?" I thought about it for a long moment. "I'm working on it. Ask me again in a year." A week later, Dennis filed for divorce. I heard about it from Rachel Morris, who was still handling the final paperwork on the custody arrangement. Apparently, Melissa had blamed Dennis for everything, for not standing up to me, for not hiding the evidence better, for choosing his crippled son over his real family. Those were her words, according to the filing. Dennis had finally found something he couldn't forgive. 2 weeks after that, I watched from my porch as a moving truck pulled away from Pinewood Drive. Dennis and what remained of his broken marriage were relocating to a rental apartment across town. Chloe and Jackson went with them. Those children would have their own healing to do, their own lessons to learn about who their mother really was. The house would sit empty for now. Eventually, I'd decide what to do with it. Maybe sell it. Maybe rent it to a family who would actually appreciate it. It didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the boy sitting across from me at the kitchen table. His crutches leaned against the wall, a chessboard between us. "Your move," Ethan said. I studied the board. He'd gotten better over the past few months. More confident. More willing to take risks. The scared, quiet boy from the garage was slowly becoming someone new. Someone who knew his worth. "You know," I said, moving my bishop, "I was thinking about turning the spare bedroom into a proper room for you. New furniture, maybe some bookshelves for all that science fiction you like. A desk by the window where you can do your homework." His eyes lit up, an expression I hadn't seen in years. "Really? Really? This is your home now, Ethan? For as long as you want it to be." He moved his knight, then looked up at me. "Grandpa, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why did you do all this? The lawyers, the court, everything. It must have cost you so much. Time, money, your relationship with Dad." He paused. "Why?" I reached across the board and squeezed his hand. "Because some things are worth doing, even when they're hard. Especially when they're hard. And because you asked me a question that night in the garage. You asked if you were worth nothing." I met his eyes steadily. "I wanted to make sure you never had to ask that question again." He blinked rapidly, fighting back tears. Then he smiled. A real smile, the kind I hadn't seen since before Melissa entered our lives. "Checkmate in 3 moves," he said quietly. I looked down at the board. He was right. My king was trapped, surrounded, with no escape. I laughed. A genuine laugh, the first one in months. "When did you get so good at this?" "I had a good teacher." We reset the board and started again. Outside, the sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. Inside, for the first time in a very long time, everything felt right. Some battles aren't about winning. They're about protecting what matters most. And sitting across from my grandson in that quiet kitchen, watching him plan his next move with confidence he'd almost lost forever, I knew I'd done exactly that. The clocks in my workshop ticked steadily in the basement below, each gear in its proper place, each movement precise and purposeful, just like everything else in my life, finally. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.